Our last presentation today is also going to really show you things that we're so proud of. This is from the UNC School of Government. Going to have an overview and development on the Development Finance Initiative with Mike Smith, the Dean of the UNC School of Government, and Marcia Machado Parrott, the Project Manager of the Development Finance Initiative. As you may know, Dean, you probably all know Mike. He's going to give us an overview of the School of Government, giving some idea about this deeply connected school that basically serves the state of North Carolina like no other. He's the latest in a long line of distinguished academics who have led this nationally recognized school in our university, and it can be traced all the way back to the legendary law professor Albert Coates. Mike became dean when the School of Government was created from the Institute of Government in 2001. He directed the Institute for 9 years. He's a UNC Law School graduate and has been on the faculty since 1978. He is going to be joined on his presentation by Marcia Machado Parrott, the projects manager, who will talk about this wonderful development finance initiative, which is helping the local governments in North Carolina secure private investments for projects, particularly in distressed areas. And she's been working with the initiative since 2012, a dual Carolina alumnus, so she may tell us about that herself. So anyway, welcome.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about this today. The School of Government is a unique school at Carolina that really helps advance this university's longstanding commitment to North Carolina. We're different in several ways. One way in which we're different is our focus is North Carolina. That means that we get to understand the challenges facing this state deeply in a way that we otherwise never would, and maybe more importantly, we get to partner with public officials and others in addressing those challenges. The second way in which we're unique is that our students overwhelmingly are North Carolina public officials. We have a great small residential Master of Public Administration program with a growing number of online students, but our focus is North Carolina public officials. And I want to be clear about what the goal is of the school. There's a slide that will show you some of the public officials we work with. The goal is to improve the lives of folks in this state by working to improve their communities. That's the end. The means by which we do that is our faculty work with public officials to make government more effective and more efficient, and we do that in three basic ways. We do really high-quality continuing education taught by our regular university faculty members. We also do research and writing, again, primarily for public officials, that draws on scholarship and at the same time is practical and accessible. Let me say that again. Draws on our scholarship and at the same time is practical and accessible. That's a fine line that our faculty members walk really well. Maybe the most significant or distinctive feature of the school is that our faculty are available to public officials for assistance by phone and email in real time, not academic time, in real time. So if a mayor has an issue on this evening's council agenda that she needs some guidance in, and she wants to talk to one of our faculty members, that has to happen today. If a judge calls a recess in a hearing on an important estate matter because he wants to talk about a complicated legal question with one of our faculty members, again, that has to happen now. And the result is that public officials call on our faculty literally thousands of times a year with exactly those kinds of questions. Some longer, some shorter, some more complicated, some not. But real-time assistance to public officials who rely on that advice. I want to mention one specific piece of our work other than the Development Finance Initiative, and that's the work that we do with the General Assembly, because I think you should know about that. Three things. We hold an orientation for all new legislators in our building on this campus. They come here for 2 days before they ever start their first session. And then after their first session, they come back for another day. And we talk about a host of issues. We do this in partnership with their legislative staff and with the blessing of their leadership. One of the interesting things that many of them talk about is the value to them of being able to come to a safe place, from their perspective, and get to know one another as people. Not as labels, not as caricatures, not as anything other than people. And what they tell us is that that makes it easier for them to do their work effectively when they get to Raleigh. The other thing that we do that's really important, and you may not know this, we have a suite of offices in the legislative building. Who knew? I did. We have a staff who every day that they're in session summarizes all legislation. It is the leading way that legislators, legislative staff, lobbyists, and lots of other people understand what's being introduced and follow it throughout the legislative process. Maybe the most important thing we do with the legislature I want to talk about now. For many years, historically, our faculty have worked with legislative staff and individual legislators to help develop legislation. And by that I mean to help them think through the issue that they're trying to deal with, to think about various policy options, and also to actually draft legislation. I've been concerned that the new majority in Raleigh is not taking advantage of our services, our expertise, in quite the same way that folks have historically. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is many of them have not come up through local government, which has been kind of a traditional pathway to the legislature. And as a result, they just don't have any direct experience with us. They may not have worked with us, and so that's fine. The other piece of it, though, that frankly hurts us is our connection to Carolina, bizarrely enough, because some of them think that because we're at Carolina, we're going to bring a liberal bias to the table and not be helpful to them, and that's just a fact. It's not everyone, but there's some folks who certainly feel that way. What I tried to do in the last year and a half or so is reach out pretty strategically to some key legislators in their districts and basically go to them and say, we want to help. Call on us. And I've tried to take on the liberal bias question directly and have raised it myself. You may not be calling us because you are worried about, and some of them have said to me, yes, I believe you're biased. And my response is, you need to try us. You need to give us the opportunity. One of our core values forever has been that we don't advocate for policy outcomes. That's not our job. Nobody elected us. They elected legislators to do that. Our job is to help facilitate their goals, whatever they are, whether I agree with them personally or not. And so what I've been saying to legislators is give us a chance, and we'll show you that that's the value that we put into practice every day. About 2 months ago, I went to Asheville and met with Representative Tim Moffitt in his office south of town. We had a really great 90-minute conversation. If I tried to meet with him in Raleigh, I'd be lucky to have his attention for 90 seconds. But I was able to meet with him, and we had a great leisurely back and forth. I think the diplomats would call it a full and frank exchange of views. And it was great. It was really great. But here's what's happened since then. And he's huge into social media. He's called on at least 5 or 6 of our faculty members to work with 2 committees that he's chairing to help provide background information, to help them understand the issues, and to help them think through their options. He's tweeted about us, I'm happy to say. Excellent resource from UNC-SOG for legislative nerds. That's his expression, not mine. For those not familiar with us, an invaluably wonky resource. I'm telling you right here, right now, I'm taking wonky to the bank. That's as good as it's going to get for us, and I'm totally fine with that. The last thing is great information from scholars at UNC-SOG. Here's my point, and I don't want to overstate this, okay? But I think we're beginning to gain traction with folks at the school. I think we're beginning to gain traction with these folks in this new majority, and I am confident that if they take our assistance, they'll be really happy, and they'll use us again. And that will benefit them, that will benefit the legislative process, but honestly, that's also got to be good for Carolina. Let me talk a little bit about the Development Finance Initiative, and then I'm going to turn it over to Marcia. One of this state's most pressing economic development problems is how to revitalize distressed areas. If you're a community and you have an old warehouse, an abandoned mill, a theater downtown that's defunct, an old hospital, or maybe just your entire small downtown area, one of the questions is, how do we revitalize that? And here's the real issue. How do you help local officials evaluate the economic viability of that kind of project? Evaluate it with their head, not with their heart, because they want it to work. So how do they evaluate that? And then how do they figure out how to put together strategic financing to make it work if it does make sense? And the truth is, those are really complicated questions that require deep expertise that most communities just frankly don't have. What we've done with the Development Finance Initiative, and you can see where we've been working across the state, is we've put together a team of faculty members, staff, and students. And they're not just our students in government. They're from the business school, they're from the law school, they're from city and regional planning, they're from public health. And what they do as teams is work with these communities on these development initiatives and provide the expertise that's missing. Think about it this way. What we do with DFI is help these folks get a project into the development phase that otherwise would frankly never get there. And it's partly because we have the expertise. It's also maybe just as important that because of all the other work we do with them, they trust us. And what we do then is put projects into a place where then the private sector can come in and complete the development, and that's what we're seeing across the state. I want to let Marcia talk about a project she's been working on. Marcia worked with us when she was a student. She graduated a year ago with master's degrees in city and regional planning and public health. She's been working with us as a contract employee for the last year, and we've just hired her into a permanent position just this week. I think as you hear her speak about work she's been doing in Kinston, you'll see why. Thank you. Marcia.
Thank you, Dean Smith, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to address you all and share the important work that's happening not only at the School of Government, but on main streets across North Carolina. So I was asked to give this presentation because I've been really fortunate to participate in the full spectrum of the DFI experience, from student, then mentoring other students, and now, well, as of next week, a permanent staff at the School of Government. So originally, when I planned to give this presentation, I was going to start by listing all these things that we're really good at. So self-financing bonds, we understand tax credits for affordable housing and historic preservation, we can help with the legal framework for structuring public-private partnerships. You get the idea. And it's true, we're really good at all of that stuff. We're total nerds when it comes to development finance. But I think you could get a better idea of our work if I could tell you a real story of a real community that we work with. One that has a lot of needs, but also a lot of promise and opportunity, but that traditional financing mechanisms just don't work there. And these are mechanisms that probably many other high-wealth communities tend to take for granted. And that place is Kinston, North Carolina, in Lenoir County, which is a Tier 1 county, arguably the heart of the eastern part of the state. And Kinston is a lot like other communities that we've worked in. It was once a thriving economy based on tobacco and manufacturing, but since then those industries have shuttered, leaving the economy pretty devastated, and Kinston struggling to reinvent itself and try to figure out how to prevent further job and population loss. Basically, mainstream market forces have bypassed this town, and it's suffering from extreme disinvestment. But there are some bright spots. Kinston's downtown is seeing some uptick in activity. It has a pretty great local foods and art scene. They're about to be the hub of the African American Music Trail and 8-county regional heritage trail network. They're strategically located on the way to the beach and near the Global Trans Park, so there's some great things happening there, but there's also a long road ahead. The photo, let me see, don't have that up. So the photo here on the top is Kinston's downtown, but the photo on the bottom illustrates a neighborhood that's directly adjacent to downtown. It's along one of the primary entranceways as visitors come into Kinston. It was devastated by flooding from Hurricanes Fran and Floyd in the 90s. A lot of families were essentially forced to relocate and seek higher ground. And now 70% of the families living in this neighborhood live in poverty, and 40% of the homes are vacant. So the map that's on your right was one of my first tasks as a graduate student at DFI, which is an on-the-ground field survey documenting neighborhood conditions, trying to learn more than what we can just get from property tax records and a high-level assessment. And that's something we end up doing a lot of at DFI, walking around neighborhoods with a clipboard, a camera, an open mind, and talking to residents and passerbys, trying to understand patterns of opportunity and what are the areas most in need of intervention. In this map, the red represents vacant properties and parcels, which you can see there's a lot of. But we were also able to see some bright spots in this neighborhood that we might not have otherwise seen without getting in the field. The green and orange, it's hard to see, represent renter-occupied and owner-occupied homes, and we found that there were little pockets of vibrancy in an otherwise desolate neighborhood, and realized that they were all centered around a church, so there must be some correlation between the presence of a religious institution and an area that has higher rates of home ownership, better upkeep, fewer code enforcement violations. So with this survey, we were able to identify a partner that we might have otherwise missed and not brought to the table. And these local partners, the church leaders, the elected officials, the community-based organizations, are really important to our work. They have an insider knowledge, a more nuanced view of the risk and potential of a project that we can't see, that just goes beyond the numbers. These relationships are really valuable to us. So in the field of public health, we talk a lot about this concept of community entree, that it's really important to build trust with community members in order to have a project get off the ground. This can be tough to do, and it can take a lot of time, but I will say that our reputation as being part of the Carolina family, of being affiliated with the School of Government, really goes a long way into giving us credibility and legitimacy with our partners and allows us to move with greater agility and urgency when it comes to development projects. So what's happening in Kinston now? Well, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in community and economic development is that it's a long game. This is a long-played strategy that you have to have a lot of perseverance and patience for. But we're making a lot of progress. So a few examples are, one is that using our UNC network, we're building relationships with former university athletes who are impact investors who want a dual bottom line return, both financial and social, from revitalization efforts in their hometown. We're also helping the city to establish an urban redevelopment area, which is a designation that gives them greater flexibility when dealing with blighted or vacant parcels and allows them to respond more quickly when development opportunities arise that are in line with their vision. So at DFI, we really understand that these complex problems really require a multidisciplinary approach, and we've created an environment for collaboration across departments. And this is really evidenced by the variety of students that enroll in our Community Revitalization Techniques course. And this class is a semester-long workshop course that provides students with real-life experience working on projects in community and economic development. And last year alone, we had students from the business school, the planning department, the law school, public administration, social work, even one person from NC State enroll in this class and join in multidisciplinary teams to tackle really tough questions. They answered questions in just this past semester, this past month, questions like, how do we attract a grocery store tenant to a low-income area where residents have limited spending power but really need access to fresh fruit and vegetables? Or how do we accelerate the development of an entire city block, including a historic theater, that just isn't being served by traditional financing mechanisms? So these are really tough questions that don't have straightforward answers. But for me, it's been a really incredible learning experience to watch these teams share their different schools of thought and converge to come up with solutions. At DFI, we're learning as we go along. We're learning from one another, and we're learning from our community partners. So thanks so much for the opportunity to reflect on my experience. It's been really nice to think about these past few years and how far we've come, and to share some of that with you. And on behalf of DFI, we're really grateful to the local government federal credit union for their support, which has allowed us to be bolder and more innovative and thoughtful in our work. Thank you.
We're happy to answer any questions that you all might have, or try to.
Michael, I thank you both, and thank you for your overview as well on the work. And I feel compelled to provide a little testimonial.
Go for it.
That everything you said is true. And I say that from having experienced and seeing a number of municipalities and how they have used your services, and the efficiency that brings is just remarkable. My work is primarily, and experience in this has been more in the economic development, land use, but in other ways as well. And it's not just impacting how the bigger communities, the larger urban areas that we think about, who have these specific needs that you're providing. But really where it's powerful is in the smaller communities that don't have those resources. You're right. And the cost efficiency and effectiveness, I think, would be tremendous. This isn't as sexy and as emotionally compelling, perhaps, as our earlier presentations, but the value for North Carolina really is remarkable. And And I guess my question would be, is there a way, or have you been able to quantify, at least at some swag level, the cost savings, the time savings, and the other benefits that really you're providing?
Thank you for those comments. First of all, I appreciate it a lot. Our faculty work enormously hard to do exactly what you say. We're working on that is the best answer I have. We're beginning to really, so for example, what a lot of local governments, and we hear a lot from small local governments that aren't heavily staffed. We actually hear from the larger governments on more sophisticated questions that that only they see and they don't see very often. What we're doing right now, we just created a new system where we're tracking the number of advising requests that we get. We've sort of ballparked that in the past. We're trying to do that partly so that we can quantify it. A lot of those questions are for lawyer members of our faculty. We have a really multidisciplinary faculty, so it's not all law. But for those, what we're going to try to do is try to attach a reasonable dollar figure on the amount of time that we spend doing that, and put that together with anecdotes about cost savings that we absolutely have. So we're in the process of putting that together right now.
Would be to keep creating what I call the Davids, the David Lawrences and the David Owenses of the world, who provide such strong academic backup for things.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Y'all had questions?
Mike, I think one of the most significant problems that we face as a country, so I'm going to go to the national level if I can for a minute just to get your insights, is the absence of dialogue in Washington. And you're obviously doing an important job in Raleigh at the state legislature area, but do you have any thoughts, or are we doing anything to try and impact the dialogue across the aisle in Washington? Because of the level of partisanship that exists today is probably unrivaled, certainly in most of our lifetimes. And there needs to be a way to try and break that barrier and get people to work together to attack some of the big problems that we have as a country.
Well, at least you're giving me an easy one to solve. I appreciate that. No is the short answer. Our focus has been North Carolina, honestly, and we've been around since 1931, and we used to, and still do, talk about how we're nonpartisan. For most of our history in North Carolina, that was pretty easy because everybody was a Democrat, frankly. That changed a lot in '94 and before, and certainly now. So we've been really focused on trying to do everything we can to permit that kind of dialogue here in North Carolina, but we have not taken on the national. I agree with you about the challenge. We have our hands full here.
North Carolina, that by comparison makes Kinston look like Raleigh or Charlotte. I'm extremely impressed with the work that you just outlined. And you used the term "we" several times. I'm interested in what capacity you've got, how many projects you could take on at one time.
Well, I'll answer that, and Marcia may want to jump in as well. It's two things to answer that question. Marcia mentioned the local government federal credit union. We wouldn't be doing this work without their financial support. In 2011, they gave us $1 million to seed this investment. That allowed us to go out and hire a really first-rate person with social entrepreneur with private development experience who's leading this effort. And they've recently made another commitment to us that has just knocked our socks off, and that is going to allow us to continue that. So one thing is we've done that, and they've made that investment because they believe that those communities are important and they see the value of this. What we're seeing right now, and the short answer to your question, what we're struggling with, as in we're meeting on it on a weekly basis, is really how to scale this. Because what we're seeing is every time we go into a community, they say, and here's the history of it, not to go too long about this, we've been doing economic development work for a long time. What we saw until we started this project is a community would do strategic planning, they'd say we want to do this, and that's where it would end because the development, the finance piece could never happen. And the projects aren't big enough, they're too messy for the private sector to get involved on the front end, frankly, with a lot of them. And so this allows that to take those ideas and really evaluate them and move them forward. What we're seeing is the word of mouth spreading of testimonials from our director of this project told me we had 3 more requests last week to help mostly rural distressed communities, and all those requests came because they'd talked to their colleagues in other communities who said, you need to really talk to these folks, they can help you. So we're trying to figure out the scaling issue right now. We're working with counsel's office, who's been fantastic, helping us try to figure out some legal structure that will make us more nimble than we are right now for exactly that reason, because our commitment and the credit union's commitment is to meet as much of this need as we possibly can. Marcia, you may want to talk about the capacity question.
We have 3 permanent staff members as well as a faculty advisor and 7 graduate student fellows who are working with us through the summer. So right now we're working in 40 communities around the state, but we're certainly getting a lot of demand for our services, but we're fortunate that with the gift from the credit union, we're able to kind of cross-subsidize and work with communities that a little bit more at risk.
I was just going to mention that Maurice Smith had planned to be with us here today, but unfortunately was delayed in traffic and can't be there, but we would have had a chance to say thank you for that support in person.
Well, and the support that they've recently given us is amazing. So they gave us $1.6 million in 2011, and what they've just agreed to do recently was a commitment of $7.1 million over the next 10 years to support this project, one other project, and allow us to create an entrepreneurship fund within the school to seed other projects similar to this one. So we're incredibly grateful to Maurice, his board, and the credit union. Any other questions?
I'm going to follow up with Lowry's question, but first I'm going to congratulate Mike. What a great hire you just made. And on top of that, she's also got a master's from 2 of our most outstanding programs in regional and city planning and public health. So we're really glad that you're going to be here. But can you tell us a little bit about your journey here and how you became interested in this?
Sure. Well, I actually moved to North Carolina in 2006 as an AmeriCorps, working on an environmental health program. And that program is really focused on kind of individual behaviors, telling people things that they could do and change in their lives to impact their health. But it became really frustrating because I realized there were all these circumstances outside of their control: the transportation, the neighborhood they lived in, the job that they had, whether or not there was a grocery store nearby that they could get healthy food. So that got me interested in the world of planning, just those connections between the health of a community, not just its physical health, but its economic health, really being very dependent on the built environment. So that's how I got here.
We're glad you did. Okay, well, thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think you might notice that in most of my big speeches, I've been talking about the School of Government, from my installation to my commencement remarks, and in part that's because when one discovers something new, you're usually very excited about it, and I think learning what this particular School of Government does has been really extraordinary. I think it's really a one in the nation in what it does, and I have to really applaud you that you're getting out there and reaching and making sure that we can still reach the bipartisan or the nonpartisan approach to government is just another example of something that would not happen anyplace else, but a great public research university. And so this was an extraordinary group of talks today. I think it just makes us feel so proud about the impact. And I just want to say, if we weren't such an amazing university, every single one of these stories would be something that we talk about every single day. So thank you. It's really been fantastic to have you all here.